There we go. Want a Google Meet rather than a Zoom, so we don't get that little voice saying you're being recorded, but it is now recording. Can I just start by thanking everybody who has signed up to attend, whether you're catching up on the recording or whether you are one of the very many people who are here live. Got more people joining us every minute. Absolutely amazing. Really do appreciate everybody joining for what really is a celebration. Today it is PD. We are going to be talking about metacognition. We are going to be talking about curriculum. We are going to be talking about how we can improve what we're doing in the classroom. We're going to talk about theory. We're going to talk about all of these things, but actually it is a celebration of this book. And also just a reminder that somebody is going to win a copy, not this copy because I've bent this, I've been carrying this one everywhere, but I do have a new copy, and somebody is going to be the winner of that copy tonight, so one of the live attendees. So please do stay tuned, and then I will be able to choose a winner at the end. I will let you know, and I will get a copy out to you over the weekend. But yeah, it is a celebration of this book. It is also a celebration of everybody who has contributed to it, because I actually wrote less than half of this book. I'm sort of here leading this tonight, but actually it's the contributors who we're going to get onto in a little bit more detail in a few minutes, who have really made what is an incredible book. And I get to say that because I've written less than half of it. So I'm not talking about my own work. I'm talking about what everybody else has done, and the power that this holds for teachers, for leaders, for curriculum designers to think about metacognition in the curriculum is huge. And I think it was a much needed text to help guide people as they look to develop metacognition in their contexts. A few things about tonight's session. It's going to run until roughly 8 o'clock. Like I say, people have got things to go and get off to. I'm going to need to eat at some point. Please ask questions at any time. For the first time ever, I'm doing a PD without a PowerPoint. I have nothing. I've got a handful of notes, but I'm literally just here to talk to you about the book, to talk to you about some of the themes, to introduce you to some of the key ideas and some of the things that I think are really important. I've got the chat up. Please do. Oh, I say that I've got the chat up. It's now disappeared. Let me get the chat back. So please do pop questions in at any point into the chat. If you're feeling brave, you can also just unmute and ask a question. So please do not leave it as just me talking and waffling away for an hour without slides and without guidance. Please do ask any questions that you do have. And it doesn't need to be about curriculum. It can be around metacognition. It can be more generally around teaching and learning. It can be around what I do as my day job. It can be anything. Okay, it can be absolutely anything. My wife joked a few minutes ago, what if nobody asked a question? What if somebody asks you what your favorite color is? Perfect. If you want to know that, then we can also talk about that. So please do ask any questions that you do have. So like I say, tonight is a celebration as well as PD. It's an opportunity for a Q&A. It's an opportunity for you to ask the questions that you may have wanted to ask. The one thing I would ask of you, if you are on social media, please do take photos. Please do mention it on LinkedIn or X or Blue Sky when it's apparently it's down. When it's back up, please do mention these things. As an educational author, and I'll come to this a little bit more later on, as an educational author, we do survive because of the posts that people put on LinkedIn and X. We're not in Waterstones. We're not on the Times bestseller lists. So anything that you can put on social media, a little mention that you've been in this tonight, any photos, anything you can mention to colleagues really, really is hugely appreciated. And anything you can, reviews on Amazon, like I say, I'll get to it a little bit more detail later, but reviews on Amazon really are the lifeblood of educational authorship. So anything that you can write, any little comment, any review is hugely, hugely appreciated. So I thought I'd start by introducing myself a little bit. I'm sure that many of you will know who I am, but I thought I'd give you a bit of background as to why is it me who sort of led on this book? Why was I the one who went, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring this together? So I'm not in the classroom full time anymore. When I was a head of maths, pastoral leader for a bit. One thing that I've reflected on recently is there was a period of time where I was actually the school Mandarin lead, and I don't speak a word of Mandarin, so that was good fun. So I've sort of done a lot of different roles in a few different schools, sort of in the East Midlands in the UK. I now get to work as a metacognitive trainer, metacognitive writer, of course, and get to write and talk and provide training on all and any things related to metacognition. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. It's been something that I've been working on for the best part of a decade now. I think up to sort of 8.5 years I've been working on this. And this is actually my third book on metacognition, fourth book in total, third on metacognition, and actually the penultimate one. So my final one is on developing a metacognitive school. That one I've finished writing, and that's going through the editorial process over summer. And then that's my final book on metacognition. At least that is what the publisher says. Apparently 4 is enough. I don't think it is, but we'll see. So that's sort of who I am. That is my background. In terms of the book, there's so much out there on curriculum. I feel like in the sort of edu-sphere, with all of these education books that we've got now, I feel like curriculum is one of those that has come up quite frequently, especially over sort of the past decade. If you go through Amazon and you have a look at best-selling books, a lot of them are related to curriculum. And here I am talking about another book that's related to curriculum. But I think this is so paramount that we understand what metacognition looks like in the curriculum. I think for those of you who've engaged with the EEF report, Education Endowment Foundation, on metacognition, we all know the power of metacognition. We know that this is something that we need to be developing. We know that this is something that's hugely important. We know that it's something that actually can transform the lives of our learners. We also are becoming better, I think, as a sector at understanding what we can do in the classroom. We sort of begin to know what strategies we can use, maybe through the modeling, the models we deploy, maybe through the questions that we ask our learners, maybe through the feedback processes that we've embedded in our school settings. We're getting better at all of these different strategies and these bits and bobs that we can do. But actually, for something to be embedded, well, it needs to be exactly that. It actually needs to be embedded within our lessons, within our curriculum. This shouldn't just be something that a teacher does because they've read a book. It shouldn't just be something that one department does because they've engaged with a report. This is actually something that if we really, really want to see its power shine through, it needs to be embedded within curriculum. It needs to be something that underpins what we're doing every single day. And it's something that I've reflected on a lot over the last 12 months, where I thought about leadership, and especially metacognitive leadership, because all of us are leaders in our own way, whether we're trying out new things in our classes, in our year groups, in our subject areas. If we're whole school leaders, we're always trying out new things. And the most important thing is that they are embedded and they do become sustained. And I always say to leaders, well, if you were to go, does your idea, do your policies disappear with you? And I think it's very easy for metacognition to exist with really high quality teachers and in departments, and then if they were to leave or the school were to change its focus one year, that can very, very quickly dissipate. It isn't actually truly embedded. And that's not to say that as soon as it's in the curriculum, it's embedded and we're sorted and we're going to have, oodles of additional progress, but it's part of the journey at creating something truly fantastic and actually giving students equitable access to metacognitive development in their learning. Like I say, we don't want to leave this up to individual teachers or individual departments. Actually, something that is codified, that is clear, and that is developed and is sequenced within the curriculum is so important. And that was really the purpose for this book. It was developing an understanding of why a metacognitive curriculum is needed. And by that, I do not mean a learning to learn curriculum. I do not mean the giving up of one period a week or the shoehorning of metacognitive lectures into a PSHE curriculum. It is absolutely not that. It is about understanding what metacognition looks like across all of our different subject areas. And actually, although primarily this book is aimed at teachers in sort of the secondary phase, there is so much in here for those in FE and in HE, and especially those in primary, understanding what metacognition looks like in different subject areas. So if you walk into a maths classroom, what are some of the metacognitive things that you can develop, and how do they link in with the topics you're going to be teaching? Or what about when you go into a science classroom, a history classroom, a geography classroom, a computing classroom? What about an art classroom or PE? We need to understand what metacognition actually looks like in all of those areas. And it's actually that which led me to get the most incredible team of experts to basically produce this masterpiece. I know that some of you will have already started reading it. I hope that after tonight, many of you do get yourself a copy and start reading it. The final almost dozen chapters written by, like I say, some of the foremost experts in their subject areas. We've got department leaders, we've got curriculum thinkers, we've got subject thinkers who just really understand their subjects, the real ins and outs of the subjects, and really understand where metacognition sits as part of that. And for that, I really want to say a huge thank you to all of the contributors. I'm going to go through briefly a little list of facts. It almost feels like a groom's speech at a wedding, thanking everybody who's sort of been part of the day. But I do just want to take a minute just to sort of acknowledge everybody who has been a part of the book. We do have, I can see on my screen, at least one of the contributors, with Dr. David Boyce with us tonight, which is very exciting, who's actually mentioned first, but alphabetical order, so it's no special favors. But David is an excellent, incredible science teacher who I've had the privilege of seeing at least one session. I'm thinking, David, but maybe more. We've met a couple of research heads, a couple of science conferences, and what David doesn't know about teaching science just isn't worth knowing. So he leads on metacognition in the sciences. We've got Liam Breitag, who has looked at what this looks like in MFL, and this was something that is really important for the book. That we, of course, have chapters on maths, we have chapters on science, we have chapters on English, but teaching isn't just maths, English and science, it's also your languages, it's your arts, it's your humanities. And Liam's chapter on understanding metacognitive development in a subject where you may only see the students once a week, you may only see them once a fortnight, or you might actually only have them for a half term if they're on a rotation with other subject areas. I think his in-depth analysis of what you can actually do and how you can build that towards GCSE to create resilient and effective language learners is just so important. We've then got Dr. Sarah Dowie, who has written our chapter for English. If you've not come across her work before, it's absolutely fantastic. Her doctorate was actually on metacognition, so a proper doctor of metacognition. I call myself Mr. Metacognition, but she is definitely doctor of metacognition. And again, her insight into the approaches that can be used, especially thinking about GCSEs and supporting students in that attainment, is really important. We've got Adam Goodwin, who is head of PE from up north in Middlesbrough, one of my favourite parts of the world. And he's written, again, another really fantastic chapter, which explores metacognition in the practical subjects. And actually, that juxtaposition of, well, what does it look like in maths, but what does it look like in a practical subject? And what are the overlaps? And what are the consequences that has for whole school leadership? We've then got Benji Groom, who has written our chapter on history. He is Oak National Academy's expert for history. I'm not sure there's a better accolade for a historian than that, and he produces the chapter on metacognition in the history curriculum. We've then got Kirsten Johnson, who has written our chapter on music and drama as well, bringing in the practical elements with the theoretical elements. And again, thinking of a subject where you may not see the students all of the time. It may be a subject where funding is reduced, and we know that nationally, potentially internationally, I don't know, but we know that there is less of a focus on music and the arts, and actually thinking about, well, what does metacognition look like, and how can we develop it there? We've then got Johnny Ushwood, who is the Teach First expert for computing and also the expert on metacognition for this book. Again, you don't become the Teach First expert on computing without knowing a thing or two about your subject area. So he has been a delight in writing that chapter for us. We've then got Lucy Williams, who has written on art and really had a look at what it means for art and how we can ensure, again, that that fits in with a whole school approach, but also considering the subject sensitivity of something like art and creative arts. And that's something we're going to get onto a little bit later. And then last but not least, we've got Ryan Wollaston, who's releasing his own book actually quite soon on mathematics teaching. He can't join us tonight. He sent me an apology email, but he's in Singapore and it's something like 3 a.m. And apparently his wife doesn't want to be up whilst he joins the call. So we've got his apologies again, but he's written an absolutely fantastic chapter. And if you do enjoy that, then I know he'll be very grateful if you go and buy his book. I think it may be on pre-order already, but I believe it's either the end of this year or the start of next year that it is coming out. So we really do have an incredible set of authors with so much knowledge of their subject areas, and that's what makes this an incredible book. I also want to acknowledge 3 other people. We've got Mary Meyer, Ruth Ashby, and Claire Hill, and I just sort of on the record want to acknowledge their contribution to this book. And I was a little bit cheeky when I was writing this book, but I wrote my first, what was it? My first five chapters. And I messaged them all and I said, I've got no money and I know you have no time, but please, pretty please, can you look through the 25,000 words I've read, and please can you give me feedback? And they all did. Within a few days, they all took the time to go word by word, line by line, and go through everything I had written on curriculum. They corrected me where I'd misinterpreted things. They pointed me in the right direction, and they also sort of ticked things off where I got it right. And however much I'm confident and comfortable with the curriculum, when you've got those 3 experts who sort of go through your work and give you some feedback, it is absolutely incredible. So a huge thanks to those 3 as well for taking the time out of the goodness of the heart to support the project. Oh, David's on the chat there, getting straight in. Perfect. Thank you, David. Yeah, so the English chapter was Dr. Sarah Dowie. So thanks are now done. That bit of the speech is finished. So I want to start to get on to some of the themes of the book. And I'm not just going to give you, I'm going to go more than sort of tidbits. I'm not just going to sort of put you on a cliff edge and force you to buy the thing. I'm going to give you hopefully some really helpful insight and at least a pause for thought, some ideas for you to consider. And the first thing is what metacognition actually is. I'm not going to go through the theory tonight. The first chapter's on the theory. If you want to talk to me about the theory, then drop me an email after today. But if we think about what the word metacognition means, if we think about the idea of cognition, the knowledge we have, the skills which we have and we're comfortable deploying. Now, how do we develop cognition? We develop it through the curriculum. We teach students knowledge. We tell them when events occurred. We give them quotes. We develop their skills, their ability to write, their ability to calculate, their ability to hypothesize, their ability to deduce. We're developing all of these things through rich and incredible curricula. Now, if metacognition has quite literally got the word cognition in it, then it is an absolute gimme that it needs to be developed within the curriculum. And I don't necessarily think this is a pitfall, but I think it's a key element of this book, that if you are wanting to develop metacognition, it can only be developed through the curriculum. It can only be developed through the subject that you are teaching, through the lessons that you are delivering. It isn't possible to effectively develop metacognitive skills for our learners outside curriculum, outside content, outside cognition. And I mean, people have tried. I mean, for many of you, you'll remember the learning to learn curriculum that we had in the UK, sort of what we're looking at now, at least 2 decades ago, really. Time has flown. But the idea of sort of trying to teach metacognition as a standalone theoretical thing is just, it's not going to happen. It can be dry enough for us as T&L experts, let alone for 8-year-olds. That's not something we want to do. We need to be developing metacognition through how we are teaching. And if we're developing it through how we teach, therefore it develops through the curriculum that we are developing. And actually, the curriculum is an incredible vehicle for us to use to develop metacognition. So one of the things that I always go on about, and for anyone who's listened to me talk before or read some of my stuff on metacognition before, I'm always banging on about time. I feel like as teachers, we probably all are, aren't we? We're always saying we need more time. We need more time for this. We need more time for that. But if you are wanting to develop metacognition, you need time. It is not dichotomous. It is not a click of fingers. You are not going to hear something tonight that you try in your school tomorrow and suddenly students have made a grade's worth of progress. They've made that 8 months worth of progress that the EEF suggest is possible. It is a long-term thing. And for that to be continuously developed, we need a vehicle. We need a vehicle to develop it. Now, the curriculum is perfect because the curriculum is never done. You have never finished a curriculum. You may finish a policy. You may finish compiling some data. You may finish developing a school development plan. But well, even those documents, I think arguably should be edited and monitored as you move along. But anyway, the curriculum is something you have absolutely never finished on. I would be amazed if there wasn't a subtle change to some level of medium or long-term planning and curriculum at least once a week. Just subtle, just words here, ideas there, resources here, lesson plans here, etc. It is something that is never done, that is never finished. And actually that's both quite intimidating, I think, that the curriculum is never finished, but it is also, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to keep improving our teaching all the time, for each year for us to get better and to get better and to get better, that actually that can come through the vehicle of the curriculum. And that is another reason why building metacognition into the curriculum is both really important, because it provides a vehicle that is never going to disappear. Curriculum is not a fad. We're not going to find in a few years' time we're going to have another government review and they're going to say, oh, we don't need curriculum anymore. I mean, we've had curriculum for however long. It's not something that's going to disappear. It's always going to be there. So we've got a continuous vehicle for development, and actually something that we already should be reviewing continuously. The curriculum is something that should inform all of our departmental time. It should be informing all of our year group meetings. It should be informing our planning, our feedback, our assessment, our exam prep. That is all fed into by the curriculum. And so that offers an opportunity, doesn't it, to develop metacognition via something that we're already repeatedly reviewing and considering. So I think the argument for metacognition in the curriculum is pretty strong. And like I say, this is not something to do on its own. It's not a PSHE topic. It's not a once a week lesson. It's something we might reinforce through a tutor time or through assemblies, but it needs to be embedded. Now, that brings me in, and I think it's the second chapter in the book where I start to think about, well, how do we do this? Where do we go? How do we begin to achieve these monumental changes and the significant progress? And I start off with the pitfalls, and I think maybe this is a negative, like start off with the things you don't want to do, but I also think it's really important to understand the things that you need to be avoiding. And I think the first pitfall of metacognition, and I also reflect on this as a leader, and when I think about metacognitive leadership, it's where we don't understand the theory. And there are huge risks to us not understanding what metacognition actually is. I think in the first instance, we have the huge risk of lethal mutation. For those of you who are unaware of this concept of lethal mutation, the idea that individuals don't necessarily understand the ingredients, the criterion that makes something successful, and implementation diverges from what the research actually found. It's a little bit like Chinese whispers. You begin to implement, you tweak things, and you end up getting so far away from what was originally done, you end up not being successful. Imagine a recipe. If you're baking a cake, maybe you do a slight different ratio of butter and flour, and you add a bit more water and a bit less this. And actually, if you do too many tweaks to that recipe, you're not going to get a lovely bouncy sponge. You're going to get a soggy mess. It's going to be a waste. And that's the same with implementation, though if we don't understand the theory, and that mutates, that changes, it Chinese whispers its way through the classrooms, then actually we're going to have something that is completely useless. And I think that's the first thing we need to ensure, that we're really clear on that theory. We also get a bit of the jingle jangle fallacy. I remember it was in Cornwall Research Ed, probably 2-3 years ago. I heard this idea of the jingle jangle fallacy, and I think it's fantastic. It was in the middle of summer, but it still makes me think of Christmas. The jingle jangle fallacy, I always get it confused, which is the jingle and which is the jangle. But the fallacy basically says that sometimes two people are talking about exactly the same idea, but they've got a different word for it, and that leads to confusion. And sometimes people have got the same word for something, but they're actually describing something different. And that's what happens. It's kind of like, oh, we all need to be on the same hymn sheet. Like, we all need to have the same level of understanding. Well, of course we do. And I think that's so integral to a metacognitive curriculum, that theory is really, really well understood, so that we are actually making the correct changes. Also, I'd point out, this is my nose echo rather than Prosecco, but celebrations for all of us. Now, the next thing that I wanted to reflect on as well was that as professionals, we have a toolkit. We often talk to new teachers around the toolkit, the strategies that they learn, the strategies that they know. And I've been reflecting a lot in the last few months, actually, since the book got sent to the publishers, on the idea of teaching as a science versus teaching as an art. And my current thinking on this idea, which is complemented by sort of chapters 2 and 3, is this idea that we work in an area that is dominated by science. We have the science of teaching. I know that sounds like quite an American thing to say. They talk about the science of this, the science of that. But we do, don't we? We have research. We know what works. I do, we do, you do. Clear routines, metacognition, feedback processes. We have. You only need to go and look at a TLAC book to know approaches that can work in the classroom. We have this huge toolkit of things that we can do. And to me, that is the science of teaching, the hard facts, the objective truths of what works to support learners. But then I think we've got this runoff with the art of teaching. Teaching is not just a science. It is not just a plug and play of the very best strategies. For if it was, we could just have robots and all sit back and relax as AI and robots took over and taught our kids everything. It is not that simple. It is about choosing the right strategy at the right time. It's about digging in to that toolbox that you have and determining and looking at the context you're in, the situations that you're seeing, what's unraveled in that lesson so far, how the students are behaving, and thinking about the tools that you are going to deploy. And you'll do different things for different learners and different things for different classes and different things in different subject areas. And this is our art of teaching. It's about understanding when to use different approaches, when to deploy different things. So metacognition is very much the science of teaching. But the metacognitive curriculum is the art of teaching, and it's the art of understanding what approaches work when and which approaches work for different subjects. And that's why we need a chapter for every different subject area. For there are multiple similarities for approaches in different subject areas. And this is not to say that every subject area should be completely different, but it is also to say that every subject area should not be exactly the same either. And we need to be really considerate of the sort of subject sensitivity and the approaches that we have available to us. I think another thing that we need to consider when we're developing metacognition in our classrooms, in our schools, is cognitive load. And there's some cognitive, and I guess here, there's cognitive load for us as teachers, right? We're learning all of these things. We're considering, we're taking the science of art and thinking about the science of teaching and the art of teaching. We're considering what to deploy and when to deploy it. There's a lot happening. We're constantly monitoring and planning and evaluating everything that is occurring. But we also have a cognitive load for our learners. And I think this is where we need to understand that though metacognition cannot be taught discreetly, i.e. metacognition is not something that can be developed in a 15-minute tutor time once a week, metacognitive approaches do need to be taught explicitly and discreetly. And this is within the content of our subjects. For if we want to compare strategies, for if we want to develop feedback ideas, that needs to be done in relation to the content that we're teaching. But we also need to teach students things like, well, how to plan. That's not something that we want students to infer. We need to explicitly teach students how to plan out a response. If we're wanting them to use checklists to support their monitoring, then again, we want them to be taught how to use that strategy. And in the book, I talk about, well, actually, for many of these strategies, we almost need an I do, we do, you do approach, where we might demonstrate to a student how to use a content checklist. And then we might develop one together, and then the students practice learning that strategy. So I think it's really important that we don't go, oh, metacognition can never be taught discreetly. No, it can't. But those strategies that we want students to learn, if we want them to know how to plan, if we want them to use a RAG rating sheet effectively, if we want them to use an exam wrapper, okay, we need to teach them how to use that. There's no point saying to our learners, here's a learning diary, it's all the rage, I've read about it in this book, guys, it's going to work for you, it's going to work, now go off and do it. Well, students aren't going to know how to do that. I would query any of you if you said, oh no, whenever I get my students to reflect, it's always perfect reflection. It's not. We always have the students who say, this was hard. Why? Because I didn't get it. This was hard. Why? I didn't read the question. That's not depth of reflection. We need to teach students how to reflect, how to plan, how to monitor, and we need to teach them the strategies in the same way that we teach them how to solve an equation, in the same way we would teach them how to spell a word, in the same way we would teach them how to put events into chronological order, how we would teach them to annotate a diagram. We teach students skills, and we need to teach them these metacognitive approaches as well. Now, I mentioned earlier, maybe I didn't promise, but I wanted to talk about time. And I think this is another important reflection. It's one of the reasons why metacognition fits in so nicely to the curriculum. But I think it's so important that we reflect that metacognition ought be something that we are developing over a number of years. Our curriculum develops over a number of years, and so should metacognition. I often challenge settings and challenge schools and say, well, how many year groups do you have in your school? Do you have 3? Do you have 5? Do you have 7? Well, there you go. That is the length of time you want your implementation to span. At least that long. It needs to remain a focus for it to be deeply embedded. For something actually to be deeply embedded, it not just needs to be written into the curriculum and used, but it also needs to be understood by new members of staff when the staff turnover. It needs to become part of the culture. It needs to influence future decision-making, not be something that we're having to actively remind ourselves to actually engage with. And I think it's really important as well that the metacognitive development of the curriculum continues to be built into professional development, that it continues to be developed within all of our curriculum work. And actually, we don't forget about curriculum. This isn't something that can fall off our school development plan. For some of you in secondary settings who are joining us here today, this fanciful idea of gain time might be heading your way. You know, that bit where the year 13s and year 11s go, and then you're given millions of tasks and loads of cover, and you actually have more work to do than before. But a lot of you will be starting to think about the curriculum during that time, and that's so important. But curriculum isn't a gain time activity. It's not a September activity. It's not a free period activity. It's an activity for all of those occasions and more. So, where do we start? Where do we even begin with understanding the approaches that we want to work on? It isn't a sensible idea to sort of go all in on metacognition in terms of, oh, there's these. I think there's 31 strategies I think mentioned in this book. Do not, please do not try and do 31 new strategies tomorrow or this year, or by the end of next year, or even by the end of the year after that. It is too many. They're there. It's a huge toolkit, but it's then the art, isn't it, of teaching. So where do we begin? How do we even acknowledge the things that we're trying to solve? If metacognition is so important, don't we need to be doing it all? Well, we do. But we also need students to be able to read War and Peace, or not quite literally, but we need them to be able to access high-end literature by the time they do their GCSEs. Well, we don't start them on that, do we, in reception, in year 1, in year 2? We build up. And that's exactly the same with metacognition. We identify a starting point and we move from there. And I've come to develop 3 different areas for understanding where we can begin. And I suggest that the first one is almost a standard pedagogical approach, where we tie it in with things that we're already working on. So if as a department, or you as an individual practitioner, or your whole school, if you are already working on modeling or questioning or independence, something like that, okay, if you're already working on these sort of typical pedagogical areas, then tie metacognition into them. That is the starting point for your metacognitive development. Tie it in, keep tying it into different things, avoid it being an add-on, ensure that it is integrated and embedded. So that's one of our options, sort of that standard pedagogical approach. We could go down a different avenue, and this is the metacognitive elements that we could have a look at. So when we break down metacognition, we've got planning, we've got monitoring, and we've got evaluation. And we've also actually got knowledge of task, knowledge of self, and knowledge of strategies. We've got that knowledge of cognition, and we've got that regulation of cognition. And we've got those 6 areas then, haven't we? Our sort of foundations of metacognition. We could pick one of them. So actually, if we're noticing that students are really struggling to access tasks, if they're really struggling to comprehend, if language skills really need to improve, if obviously abilities need to improve, then maybe we begin with knowledge of task and actually have that as our starting point for approaches that we embed within our curriculum. And then the final area that I suggest we could have a look at are tricky problems or wicked problems, things that are perennial, things that just do not seem to go away. And actually, many of those things were dealt with in my second book on metacognition. So that book was called Teaching Hacks. And that looked, again, that drew on a dozen or so experts who are just absolute legends, experts in their field. And they all took horrible problems like reading comprehension, like extended writing, like exam revision, like feedback. They took awful problems that we always struggle with, and they had a look at the metacognitive solutions. And actually, that's a really nice way to go about it, because actually there is no solution for a wicked problem. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be wicked problems if there was an evident and obvious solution. They wouldn't be wicked. So actually beginning with one of those and embedding metacognition into those areas is a really nice thing to do. Now, in, I think it's chapter 4, maybe chapter 3, I reflect on something that we love to do in schools. We love it. We absolutely, well, we hate it, but we also love it. And that's collect data. We do quite a bit of it. I don't know if you've ever noticed. Now, that is a regular question to me around developing metacognition and understanding where to begin and considering how effective metacognitive curriculum development has been. We've got to measure it. We need to get some data. And we can. There are a couple of different things that we could do, and I'm going to tell you how to do them, and then I'm going to tell you how to use them carefully. The first thing we can do is draw on the Perkins scale of metacognition. This is work from incredible theorist, early 90s. It's published in 1992, David Perkins. And he wrote about the 4 different levels of metacognition, from tacit all the way through to a reflective metacognitive individual. Again, all mentioned in the book in far more detail, gives you characteristics and criteria. Now, it's really helpful work, because actually understanding metacognition or metacognitive levels and understanding where students are up to is really quite hard. It's a difficult to measure thing, and he breaks it down ever so nicely. Now, please do not go and put a Perkins level of metacognition against all of your learners. It will take forever, and it just isn't needed. But what you absolutely can do is give staff the opportunity to discuss in department areas, in year group areas, as a whole school, where are your students on that scale? And therefore, what do you think the important area to begin development is? Because you've got to identify that area to begin work on. We know it needs to be integrated into the curriculum, but we need to know that starting point. Now, if you're wanting to go into more depth, then we can use the Junior Metacognitive Awareness Inventory, which I believe is the most effective of the in-depth measures, approaches to metacognition. It's not something that's particularly easy to run. It's actually something that I'm trialing with a dozen schools right now across the UK. It's something that if you're interested in, please do reach out to me. It's going to be part of my offering moving forwards. And that will give us an idea of where students are strong, where they are weak. And that should therefore give us an idea of where to begin with our development. The one thing I would say with both of these measures or any other measures that you come up against is, please don't use them to judge teachers. Please don't use them for performance management targets. Please don't measure 1 year and then get students to do them the next year and sort of critique staff based upon it. This is curriculum development. It is consistently, continuously developing. It is a journey of improvement, not a stick to hit people with. And I warn that because we've all worked in those contexts and we all know of those contexts where things like that could be utilized as performance management and yet more data and targets that staff are meant to meet. Now, there's one phrase that I want to stick with you. And it's this phrase of fewer things, greater depth. 31 odd approaches in this book. You cannot do them all. I would always recommend doing fewer things in greater depth. Choose one approach, 2 approaches. Do 3 or 4 things over the course of an academic year, not a week, not a term, an academic year. Slow down, go deep. You want students to not just understand these approaches that you are developing, you want them to use them, and then you want them to use them independently. You want them to be integrated into the practice of our learners. That's where they become effective. An effective metacognitive learner will utilize these metacognitive approaches that you are developing when they're on their own. So this is not just a thing for you to model. It is not just a set of questions for you to ask. It is not just a planning template that you deliver, but rather it is an integration of appropriate strategies at points in the curriculum, revisited over and over again within the curriculum so that students internalize and understand what to do. Metacognition, it's like getting a puppy for Christmas. You'll probably all remember. Do you remember the advert where it's like, you don't get a dog for Christmas? Metacognition isn't just a Christmas. It's not just for 1st of September. It's not, let's add in a few approaches. Oh, and we do them a lot in September, and we maybe do a few in October, and by November there's one teacher doing it out of everybody. No. This is about deciding on a strategy. It's about understanding where you want to develop students and then appropriately developing it in your curriculum. Week after week, month after month, term after term. It's not just about doing it in that half-term one. It is about identifying the opportunities throughout your curriculum and understanding where those approaches live. And if you're thinking, that's a lot of work, where do I begin? Well, that's why we've got chapters from the experts. So in those chapters from the experts, and there's literally, you can see, let's have a look, mathematics, there we go. You've got well over half the book. You've got sort of 70% of the book is those subject experts identifying the approaches that work in those subject areas. So each of those experts has identified 9 approaches across planning, monitoring, and evaluation. They've identified 9 things that work and told you where they work. So that's your head start for understanding where to embed it within your curriculum. And I'm going to say something cliche now, and it's about developing a journey. We always talk about journeys in education, don't we? Now, don't think that just because you're doing 1 or 2 things at once, you can't begin to think about what comes after. You absolutely can. You absolutely can. So when you know what you're introducing first, think about what comes next and what comes next. What approach is going to be embedded within your curriculum from January? What about for March? What about just before summer? What are you going to kick off next year with? What does that journey look like? And there is a whole chapter in the book on developing that metacognitive implementation and thinking about curriculum and development over time. Now, one of the things which I've hinted about, and the fact that we've got these subject chapters, tells us that subjects matter. We have a huge argument in education around whole school alignment and subject sort of sensitivity, don't we? We have this huge thing about structure versus agency. What needs to be consistent and what can teachers do? What flair can they apply? Metacognition. Metacognition. It relates to the cognition. So every single subject area, that metacognition is going to look a little bit different. And that's why we need chapters on every curriculum area. If we didn't, this book it wouldn't be needed, but it was needed because it looks different in different subject areas. And so what we need to do is we do need whole school consistency. This is not me saying whatsoever that every single subject area should have different approaches. Not at all. So chapter 6 in this book outlines all 30 odd approaches, and it explains what they look like. And then each of our experts within their chapters has interpreted those approaches for their subject area, being very, very careful to keep the active ingredients the same. So actually when Ryan in the maths chapter, or David in the science chapter, or Sarah in the English chapter, or Kirsten in the music chapter, whoever it might be, when they're talking about an approach, it's the same approach being used elsewhere. The active ingredients remain true to the theory. They will remain true to ensuring consistency across your school, your college, your context, but it also allows for that subject sensitivity, that interpretation, to allow it to suit the curriculum. This is not about shoehorning in ideas for different curriculum areas. This is about ensuring consistency across your school, but allowing your subject experts to interpret those ideas for the curriculum that they are delivering. Curriculum is the vehicle to develop metacognition, but only if the strategies fit that vehicle. There's no point shoehorning them in. They need to be adapted to the curriculum that students are learning, that teachers are delivering. So we need to identify those active ingredients. What does planning templates look like? What does a knowledge organizer, a graphic organizer look like? Sorry. What does a content checklist look like? And then allow subjects to interpret that carefully in their areas. And again, in the book, I look at how we can ensure that we sort of get that consistency and how we can maintain that. And actually, that's a huge focus of my next book, developing a metacognitive school, because that's so important. So we need to keep that whole school consistency. And actually, there's a really, really important reason for that. Well, there's two hugely important reasons. The first is for our students. We will teach one subject in secondary, maybe two. In primary, we're teaching a lot more, but we'll have our areas of expertise. Now, if students are learning 9 metacognitive approaches in art, 9 in music, 9 in science, 9 in history, 9 you can see where I'm going here. They're going to be learning 100 approaches, and they're all going to be different. That is not going to help that cognitive load. Students are not going to embed a metacognitive approach by doing it with Liam once a fortnight in French. They're not. They're absolutely not. Okay, by doing it once a week with Adam in PE, that's just not going to happen. So those approaches need to be consistent across different areas so that students can get familiar with them and they can understand how they vary and how they are similar subject to subject. But we also need to ensure that consistency for our staff members. We're never going to have effective PD. We're going to fall into that jingle jangle fallacy if we're continuing to use different language, and if we're continuing to have a variety of different approaches. We need consistency to allow for whole school PD, to allow for effective support, to allow for sharing of ideas and allowing for sharing of resources, and to have those effective conversations and coaching opportunities. Now, in a slightly more deeper consideration of curriculum, I reflected hugely on the work of Ruth Ashby, a huge inspiration to some of the really deep thinking of curriculum theory. And there's 2 things I want to share quickly. The first is a quote from Ruth Ashby, and it reads, "The power of the abstract is prone to mutate." And I think that's so important, but if our staff don't understand what metacognition is, if our staff don't understand precisely what these approaches are and what the aims are, then we're likely just to get, well, teaching and learning chaos. They're all going to go quite awry. And then she develops this idea of creator versus implementer. And I think this is so important, because you're all here listening to this tonight, and there's everybody catching up on the recording, and you may all get a copy and you might start working on this, and that's great. You might develop metacognition in your curriculum. Fantastic. Please do. That's going to be brilliant. But what about the people who then pick up that curriculum and are trying to implement it, having never seen it before? We have all delivered a lesson that has been planned by somebody else, And we get halfway through and we go, oh, not too sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. What did they mean? What was meant here? I'm going to just teach it in my own way. That consistency begins to dissipate. We don't want that in our curriculum. If one person develops our curriculum, 5, 6, 7, 20 other people are going to interpret it in their own way. And that's where we get the power of the abstract is prone to mutate. It needs to be incredibly clear what metacognitive ideas we're developing, where, why, and how. And we need to ensure that all of our members of staff are part of that journey, part of that conversation, part of that story. And that's why codified documents are so important. And I want to reflect that I remember a few years ago, I think there was a huge push on the Gatsby benchmarks in the UK, getting careers built in. And in so many schools, curriculums underwent a transformation. Curriculums suddenly had an extra column added onto them, and people put in real life applications of that thing that they were learning as another column. It wasn't integrated, it was a bolt-on. That's what can happen here with metacognition. I need to be metacognitive. I need to develop metacognition. Let me put another column on that Excel spreadsheet, on that Word table of my curriculum document, or let me just add another line to the bottom. That's a bolt-on. That is simply an add-on to what we are doing. Please don't make an extra document. Please don't make an extra column. Integrate it within what you are teaching. When you're identifying learning aims, this is something I love to do. We identify the cognitive learning aims. What about the metacognitive learning aims? What is the metacognitive thing you want students to learn in that lesson? What is the metacognitive development you want to occur within that period that you are teaching? What is the metacognitive development that should be seen over a topic? Because it's going to be developed through what you're teaching. It's going to be developed through the models you use and the questions you ask and the feedback that you give. So if the way that you are developing metacognition is through how you're teaching, then your document should reflect that. If you are giving students an exam question and you're so wanting them to improve their exam structure, well, maybe as part of that, you're going to give them opportunities to plan, to reflect on different approaches, to look at past paper answers. The aim of that is to improve metacognitive planning and integration, adding it in to what you've already got. Yes, maybe it's in a different color. Okay. I will hesitate. I'm not a huge fan of color coding curriculum documents, but that's because I'm colorblind. But maybe it's in a different color. Okay. But it is not a bolt-on, it's not an extra color. Now, we are getting quite close to 8 o'clock. And like I say, I appreciate lots of people will need to get off. There's a couple more things I want to mention in terms of the book before I leave you with some final thoughts. The first is that you may be thinking yourself, or you may get pushback from other staff saying, we're already doing this. Metacognition is being developed in our lessons. Well, yeah, it probably is. You cannot teach effectively without developing metacognition. Absolutely, you cannot. And so the book reflects on how we get around those arguments and understanding what it means to actually develop a metacognitive curriculum and why it's needed for that consistency. And also because metacognition doesn't happen by luck. Actually, if we want to be developing it really effectively, then it needs to be planned for. And as soon as it needs to be planned for, it needs to be integrated into the curriculum. The book also has a large section reflecting on the importance of subject expertise. There is a reason why I didn't write the chapters in this book. I got subject experts to write the chapters in this book. The only one that I wrote was on form time. Now, we need subject expertise, and you will need that in your schools as well. Most of the time that can be done internally. Sometimes it will need to come from the trust. Sometimes you will need that external expertise. It is crucial to understand the subject area, to understand how to integrate those whole school approaches into your classroom. Now, I want to leave you with, I've got three final notes. I'm quite impressed with myself that I could have probably done 2 hours with these little notes that I've done. So there we go. No need for a PowerPoint anymore. I wanted to leave you with the reflection of what I hope that you can get out of the book. So firstly, I hope that it continues your journey in understanding what metacognition is and the importance of metacognition. I also hope that it helps you develop your understanding of what curriculum actually is, why it's so important, and why it needs to be a vehicle that is continuously developed. Most importantly is developing that understanding of what metacognition looks like in a number of different areas. I want you to understand what the next steps are, and I hope that the book provides a guidance for change and understanding of where you go next and how to ensure that that journey is successful for you. I mean, the book is 200 pages long, so much to digest, but hopefully, as with all my writing, the aim is for it to be dip in and outable, i.e. it's easy to read if you're there at 10 p.m. on a Friday night. It's not heavy. It is something that you can hopefully engage with and enjoy. I also want to reiterate that I am always here to support. Metacognition is my professional life. My wife would probably say that too. Sometimes it's too much of my whole life. It is something that I care passionately about, something that I am, I work every single day on 10 hours a day, pretty much every day. So please, if you ever have any questions, please ask. I'm not in a rush to get off at 8 o'clock. If you have got any questions, please do hang around and ask. You are always welcome to reach out on social media. I am always happy to come and visit you. I am always happy to come into your schools, whether it's delivering training, providing you some one-to-one support, some coaching, or just to see what you are doing. It is always my pleasure and my delight to be able to support in whatever way I possibly can. The last thing that I want to leave you with is sort of that final plea again, bringing back those things we mentioned at the start. How can you help me? So please do, if you get a copy of the book, please mention it on social media. If you are reading the book somewhere, please take a photo of it and pop it up. Tag me, I will share it. Please do go and pop a review on Amazon. If you have read any of my books, not just this one, but if you have read any of them, please, it takes a couple of minutes to go and leave a review. It makes a huge difference. Please do share ideas from today with colleagues, put it into networks. I'll be sharing clips. I'm more than happy to share this recording with anybody you think would be that it would be helpful for. So yes, please do share all of this. Like I say, please do pop it onto social media, and most importantly, please do reach out to me if there is anything at all that I can help you with. Can I just reiterate, I am so grateful for you all joining me tonight for the celebration. I am going to go off in a minute and finish my Prosecco and maybe start on some Prosecco as well. Thank you so much all. Please do reach out to me with any questions. I really hope that there was enough PD thrown in with almost the navel gazing of the book tonight. I really hope you got a lot out of it. I really enjoyed sharing all that with you. You can hopefully tell I'm really excited. This is, I probably shouldn't have favorites. It's like having favorites with your kids, isn't it? But this is my favorite book so far. I feel like I say that with every new one, but I just think that it's so needed, so important. Right, I won't keep you any longer. I hope that you all have an absolutely incredible evening. I hope that wherever you are, you've still got a little bit of sunshine and hopefully a little bit of dryness. I managed to get the clothes out on the line today, which was lovely. So yes, please take care. You absolutely know where I am. If there is anything that I can help you with, please log off as you please. I'll hang about in case anybody has got any questions. But thank you so much. Everybody have a lovely evening, have a fantastic Friday, and a wonderful weekend when it comes. Speak to you all soon.
So the book did make it on time, Nathan.
Hey, look at that. Amazing stuff.
Yes,
amazing.
I did not wait until tomorrow, so I got it this morning.
Amazing. Oh, fantastic. Well, cannot wait to hear what you think of it. And on my list of things to do tomorrow is to get back to you, and I will drop you an email and get cracking on everything.
I assume that you were busy with the launch of the book, Nathan. So
yeah, no, thank you. No, amazing. But are you keeping well? All good your end?
Yeah. Everything is good. Everything is good. I mean, I had a restful holiday, all things considered.
Yeah.
I had to look at some details of the manuscript, and I'm still working with the editor.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's all good. Nothing that I did not expect at this point. But no, I think that leaves me very primed for this other book. So
perfect.
I'll tell you about it. Because ideas are fresh in my head. Reading and thinking kind of has warmed me up for the ideas that I share. No, I think that one thing that I appreciated, people left, I wish I had said this earlier so that they could hear it, is the time that you devoted to the different subject areas. Nathan, I think people should appreciate that.
I think it's so important. I remember probably about a year ago, I went into a university to do some training, and it was with a full cohort. You had all your maths teachers, science teachers, English teachers, but you also had your arts and your music. And in every session, I started with examples for music and drama and your technology, your computing. And I had a couple of students come to me later and be like, we've never had any examples from our subject areas, let alone first. And they were just so almost like emotional about it because it's just forgotten. And I think, yes, maths and English and science are important, but and they make up half the time, maybe a little bit more that students are in school, but these other subjects are so important. And actually, if we're not careful, they will die a death pretty darn quickly if we don't appreciate and honor their importance. And it wasn't that long ago that the privileged and the rich would study music and art, and it wouldn't be science and maths that they'd be studying. It would be the arts, and then maybe a bit of literature, and how things have changed. But I think it's so important that they have the same PD and respect that other subject areas have.
No, I think that right now, Nathan, thinking is a currency. And whoever says otherwise, I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah.
The more that I read about, cognitive science and the likes, the more that I get enervated when people say, oh, they don't need to memorize things, they can look things up on the internet. And then I just feel like, well, you clearly don't understand how we form an understanding.
Yeah.
If
I'll just Google it. Yeah.
To do it. Yeah. So very interesting times. I do think that there should be a lot more emphasis in how to cultivate this, not only as a faculty but also with students. But I have the feeling that it's so abstract and it requires so much deep reflection that this is the territory that a lot of teachers dread going into, because it will demand a huge amount of energy. But I think it's going to be energy that will be very well spent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining tonight. Like I say, I will get back to you. And you're at work. You are going to Toulouse, aren't you?
Huh?
Are you going to Toulouse for the conference later on this year?
Yes.
Yeah. So at worst, I will catch you in person then if I don't catch you in person beforehand. But yeah, I will get back to your email tomorrow.
Yeah, don't worry. And congratulations again. I got my copy right here.
Thank you so much. Amazing. Catch up with you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.